Welcome back. We will start with lecture 4 today. We are looking at morphological processes and how children acquire their morphology and inflectional morphology more precisely. And within that we have looked at few theories and with respect to the nativist theory as well as the constructivist theory. So, taking this discussion forward, today we will discuss about blocking hypothesis. Now, blocking hypothesis is a very well researched domain. There is a rich literature that is available there. But we will be focusing mostly on the primary notions within this blocking hypothesis, the fundamental ideas as to what this is, and we will try to see the two opposing sides of explanation as far as why the blocking happens, if at all it is a blocking, what is blocking, and if it is a blocking, and so on. So, we have seen that there are two types of predictions about the English past tense form when we talked about the past tense debate. While discussing that, we talked about two different types of models, word and rule model and the connectionist model. So, now we will look at some of the connected notions with respect to these two models. We will come back to this when we discuss about the single and dual root hypothesis, but first let us look at blocking hypothesis as we just planned. Now, what is blocking hypothesis? Remember, we talked about that children tend to overgeneralize. So, go becomes good, and then learning the went, go and went form takes a bit of a time because of the overgeneralization. The idea from the nativist perspective is that they are, because they have the rules are in place and they tend to overgeneralize because they are simply using the rule with the new words that they learn. Now, this is where the idea of blocking comes in, because there are certain cases where you cannot have certain kinds of words, cannot use certain kinds of word in favor of certain other. They may be connected in terms of lexical entities, as in they are lexically similar by sharing the root, or they may not be sharing the root, but they are similar in terms of meaning. So, first of all, what is blocking? So, the idea of blocking was based on the idea of irregular words that are listed lexically. That is what the word and rule hypothesis says, that in terms of the while discussing our past tense debate, we discussed about the same thing, that go to went is part of the irregular form. So, went is a irregular form, whereas walk to walked is part of the rule based output. So, in terms of this theory, the irregular forms are part of one list, the regular forms are the part of another list. So, this is based on this same idea, and as a result of which, because we have two lists, lexically listed words can block those derived by rule. That is where our blocking hypothesis comes from. So, the lexically listed words, that are the irregular forms that are already listed as words themselves, even if they have a grammatical purpose of denoting the past tense, even then they are part of the list, lexical list. So, this is so if there are two forms, there is one lexical form and then there is one derived by the rule. So, go becoming goed and go having went as the past tense. These are the two possible formulations, possible past tense forms. Now, if that is the case, then the lexically listed words, which is went, can block those derived by rule. So, this is how Aronoff, to whom this entire idea goes back, Aronoff 1976. So, he says that the non-occurrence of one form due to the simple existence of another. This is blocking. So, certain forms, not only with respect to past tense, but various others, as we will see shortly. There are two kinds of forms that are possible, but one seems to block the other. That is the idea of blocking. So, why does it happen? Just because another form already exists. So, you do not need to derive by rule the other form. So, because went exists, you do not need to create a code. That is the idea. Simply put, similarly, words and phrases also seem to interact with blocking effect in place. So, Aronoff's idea, and then it was later on discussed in Poser also 1992. So, there they talk about the not only about went blocking good, but also the word smarter blocking more smart. So, when you have to create the superlative or the comparative degree in English language gives you an opportunity of using the suffix er for creating the comparative form. So, bright, brighter, smart, smarter, like that. So, but you also have the structure where you have the form using another lexical entity like more. So, more beautiful, most beautiful, you do not say beautifuler or no like that. So, this is another possibility. So, in those cases also the lexical entity, the smarter, will block the phrasal entity which is more smart. So, this is how Aronoff and Poser talked about the blocking hypothesis. So, the idea, basic idea in terms of blocking as far as these scholars are concerned, it is based on the notion of competition. So, the competition between could be between a word and a phrase or two different forms of words. Like we just saw the went versus goat, that are two forms of the same word hypothetically. Similarly, you have smarter versus more smart. So, these are the two different kinds. So, there is an underlying notion of competition between two possible entities that is there, and because of which one entity blocks the other entity, and thereby we have smarter more often there as opposed to more smart. That is the idea. So, in terms of Poser, this is actually called Poser blocking. Words win over phrases, that is his idea. So, if there are single word entities, they will tend to win over phrases. So, that is why you use more often smarter over more smart. So, this idea has been followed by Kipersky as well. So, there are of course, this idea is quite complicated and has been dealt with from multiple perspectives, but to simplify we will look at the blocking hypothesis from lexical relatedness and semantic relatedness perspective, because when we say that go and goad are semantically related, they are go and goad becomes that is ungrammatical, but this is where you use the ed inflection. So, that is one way. Here if you look at it that way, it is lexically related, but if you let us say other kinds of forms, there can be semantic relatedness even when there is no lexical relation. For example, thief and stealer kind of thing, which we will see eventually. So, lexical connection as well as semantic connection is what we will see. So, in case lexical relatedness is a case in which exists the textbook or the definition of what we mean by this. So, a case in which the existence of one form prevents the appearance of another form whose existence would otherwise be expected, all other things being equal. This is what basically lexical relatedness means. So, basically in terms of semantics, if you look at it in terms of semantics, means the words need to have competing forms. They have, but they are forms of the same root. So, they might be sharing the root, and that is why lexically related, but they will be sharing the meaning. That is that they will be sharing the root. They will have competing forms. So, among the most famous cases, again we have to go back to Aronoff's work all the way to 1976. So, there he discussed in detail about this and he discussed the idea of blocking in terms of a relation between a bare form of the noun. A bare form of the noun, he means the root form, the one which has no affix attached to it. So, the bare form. So, go is the bare form for going, like that. And then adjectives formed from these nouns with the suffix OUS. So, you can create for example, from glory it becomes glorious, like that. So, this is there you create an adjective from there, and the possibility of further nominalizing the adjective with ity and ness as by adding these two suffixes. Now, deriving this might be blocked. Where is it blocked and why is it blocked? This is what Aronoff discussed. So, in English we might question why this, because in English you have curiosity and viscosity as words as real words. So, because this is there, it suggests that ITY can attach to adjectives in OUS form. So, curious and viscous like that, and create abstract nominals. So, this is possible. So, you can derive nominals from adjectives by using the ITY or ness. So, ITY is attested by this kind of words. So, as per Aronoff, if the OUS adjectival form decomposes into an independent noun like glory and the affix OUS, then the ITY form is blocked. So, this is the case where blocking will happen as far as this theory goes. So, for example, if a word has a bare form glory like glory and it also has OUS, then you cannot attach ITY to it. In this case, it will be blocked. However, on the other hand, if the OUS adjective cannot be decomposed in this way, then the OCT form is grammatical. So, basically the absence of, let us say in case of the word curiosity, it is here ITY is allowed because this form does not have a bare noun something like curie. So, glory is there, glory, glorious, and that is why gloriosity is not allowed, but curious is there. Curious cannot be further decomposed into a bare noun like curie or something of that hypothetical form, and thereby it allows curiosity. So, that is how he explained why blocking happens. So, why is it that we cannot? So, this is a list from his work, a few list of nouns. So, these are the cases where all of them have OUS, and then we have this nominal. So, in this case, for example, tenacious does not have a bare form, and that is why tenacity is allowed, and then the tenaciousness is there, is also possible. But in this case, there is a bare form like fallacy, and hence this is not this cannot be allowed because it has a bare form. So, it is not allowed. So, this is how Aronoff describes the idea of which kind of derivation will be blocked and which will not be blocked, primarily based on whether it has a bare noun form or not. Now, the argument is that less predictable forms like ITY should be listed as nominals in the relevant category, like they are part of the list, the lexical list, and blocking occurs between lexical forms. So, that for example, glory blocks gloriosity. Why is it that if there is a bare form it will block ITY? Because both ITY and the bare noun will be part of the list as opposed to the grammatically rule governed list. So, this, and because you cannot have two nominals in the same list, hence glory will block the ITY format. So, technically glory occupies a slot. So, in Aronoff's theory there are slots in the structure of the word. So, there is a bare form, that is this IOS form, that is ness, and then IT and so on. So, if there is a bare form, IT cannot take the position of the bare form of the listed domain. This is the slot. So, technically glory occupies a slot associated with this root. So, that slot cannot be occupied by an IT affixed form, but if there is no root form like glory, like you do not have curie, so there you can have curiosity. That is how the arguments provided by Aronoff. Now, these are the components. He further breaks it down into components. Again, it is very sketchy, just the ideas I have added here. So, paradigmacity, he gives 4 particular components. One is paradigmacity. So, each lexical item is associated with a set of cells expressing different meanings for that. So, it is something like a the kind of a grid. There are cells. So, you have multiple possibilities in that, like this, somewhat like this, right. So, expressing different meanings for that lexical item. So, you have glory here. So, let us say you have the bare noun here, and then you have the OUS form here, and then you have the ness form here, and so on. But in some case if it is not there, then you have the ITY. So, basically the idea is that there are these slots for each lexical item having different meanings. Now, if depending on if you have there are two forms, then one will be blocking the other, right. So, each cell may be occupied by at most one phonological form. So, you cannot have two phonological forms in one particular slot. That is the idea of paradigmicity, basic idea. Then the idea of lexical relatedness, from where we started this entire discussion. So, the competition that results in blocking is between words that share the same root, that is one, that is the second notion, second component of his idea. Third is irregularity. Irregularity is of course very crucial to blocking. Only elements that are irregular in some respect must be listed in the lexicon, otherwise they will not be. So, this is the again the same kind of structure that we talked about in terms of word and rule. So, irregular forms will be part of the word, they are memorized, they are learnt as lexical entities rather than by deriving by using the rules. So, they must be recorded in the paradigm slots, that is what we saw just now. And then the fourth component is wordhood. The objects that are entered into paradigm slots and thus compete with each other are by virtue of blocking are words. So, they all are words. So, they have to have what he calls wordhood. In order for them to be part of one how do you look at it from a bigger perspective? These are words and not phrases, or they are not sentences, that is what he means. So, in order for them to be part of the same paradigmatic slot and in order to be as a result be able to block each other, they have to be words. So, these are the four components of his theory. Now, if you there are other theories that looked at the same blocking hypothesis, same blocking principle as to how it works, and it can, if it can be explained in any different way. So, the other side of the debate is from the distributed morphology hypothesis, distributed morphology theory. This theory allows for competition for the phonological form of individual nodes. Now, distributed morphology is a syntactic understanding, syntactic perspective. It is not based on only words. So, this is based on the process, the syntactic rule that applies for creating words and phrases and so on. So, as far as this is in the generative tradition. So, as far as this theory goes, there is no need to prevent the gloriosity kind of output via competition. They have a very different way of looking at it. So, the distribution of ITY is what they are focusing on. As far as this theory goes, the distribution of NES, ITY or OUS and so on and so forth, where they fall in the hierarchical pattern and how restricted is their use, and if it is not and in what cases they can be used. These are the main ideas within this framework. So, let us see how they actually go about it. This is one possible structure for, let us say, gloriosity. So, this is called this is a root nominalizing function. So, here we have a structure. So, the nominalizing head, this is the nominalizing head is attached to the root. So, this is the main word, the root word here is glory, and then we have a nominalized, this is little noun nominalizing n, head n, that is attached to the root. Now, sometimes if it is sometimes this n may not have a overt phonological manifestation, there may not be anything there, but in this is also possible to have OCT. So, ITY is a listed property in this within this theory, this is a listed property, they call it listed property, and which is correlated with the presence of certain roots. Now, ITY within this framework is a part that cannot attach to any kind of root. So, there are certain roots that allow the use of ITY. Now, the root glory is just not there in that list, in question. So, that is how the distributed morphology looks at it. So, glory as a noun does not have ITY within its scope to be attached to it. Hence, the grammar will simply not create a word like gloriosity. that possibility itself does not exist. So, you are still following rules and not this, here you do not need a competition between two different words. The idea here is that even a word, a single word or two word constructions, all of them are arrived through syntactic processes. So, certain processes are allowed, certain processes are not allowed as per rule. So, that is how you can justify the use of glorious and not gloriosity. So, this is one. So, in this structure, this form simply does not allow to attach to root glory. That is another way of looking at this within the same theory. This is called adjective, this is added to an adjective. So, this is root combined with an adjective head. So, this is where it comes from. So, for you have the root and then you have the adjective head A. So, this is the structure at this level. With some heads, the n head defaults to the phonology ness. So, this is also dependent on what can attach to what. So, with some heads, there are the n heads default to the phonology ness, not to the phonology of ITY. Hence, there is no reason to expect to find ITY in this case either. So, whether you look at it from this kind of a structural form or from the previous one, there are two possibilities following certain theoretical positions. So, there this simply is not allowed. In this kind of a situation, ness will be allowed, in if you follow this road, ness will be allowed, not ITY. So, the grammar will simply not create the ITY structure. Thus, distributed morphology argues that either way, either whether you follow the first or the second pattern, the grammar of English provides no reason for speaker to suppose that gloriosity will exist. It will simply not exist, because within the grammar of English this is not allowed as far as distributed morphology is concerned. So, that is about the lexical part. Now, there is another aspect of it which is called synonymy blocking. This refers to the idea that competing forms simply have to mean the same thing. So, they do not have to share a root, they simply can mean the same thing and still you will see the blocking effect. So, for example, the word like stealer versus thief. Stealer is somebody who steals, thief is also somebody who steals. So, they do not share the root, but they mean roughly the same thing. So, this is a notion of blocking based on meaning independent of lexical relatedness. So, this is very important, because in synonymy blocking we are looking at words that are not built on the same root. They are built, they are simply, they just share the meaning, they are independent of the lexical relatedness. The problem here is sharing of semantic space. The idea here is that of semantic space. Hence, it is not ungrammaticality or non-existence of a form that is the reason for blocking. It is the idea of shared space. So, the space is taken by thief, then you do not need stealer to be used there. So, from steal to stealer you do not need to go there, because the word thief is already there occupying that semantic space. Now, semantic space is a very important concept in children's language acquisition, because often the language, the acquisition of words, they are based on the notion of uniqueness of entities. So, you learn a new word when it refers to a new entity, a unique entity, not the one that you have already learned before. So, as a result of which we have discussed this in another module. So, I am not getting into the detail here. So, the idea of semantic space is very important as far as child language acquisition goes. So, it is you cannot have more than too many words competing at that space. So, that is why it is important, because uniqueness is crucial. Hence, semantic, as a result of which semantic blocking appears to be a plausible situation. Now, the arguments against this idea also comes from the same theoretical position of distributed morphology. So, here the idea is that for example, this there are of course lot of literature available, but one very important one, they talk about pairs like horses, as in horse to horses, like prince to princess. So, why cannot we have horse becoming horses in the feminine form, but we have mare. So, here why is this a case of blocking? because the idea here is that because the word mare exists, it blocks the creation of the word horses. That is how it is. So, it becomes redundant because a mare exists, so horses becomes redundant. However, the idea that similarly turtleless cannot exist. This is a deviant form independent of the other the distributed morphology argues that it is that the words like turtleless or hare, horses, this kind of words are deviant even if there are whether there is or there isn't and a word that is already existing. Another word for female turtle or a female horse exists or not. So, turtleless we do not have, like for horse there is mare, but for turtle I am not sure whether there is a word for that, but even let us say it is not there, even then turtleless is not a good choice. That is what they say. Similarly, if we stick to the same semantic domain of let us say lioness, so we have leopardess and tigress, however, we do not have jaguaress and pantheress. So, leopardess exists and jaguaress does not. So, what is happening here? So, the same semantic domain, same club of animals, but we do not have the some forms are allowed, some forms are not allowed. So, and now let us look at the distributed morphology, how they tackle this. So, they consider that the interaction between smarter and more smart does not involve blocking and there is no competition at all. So, we are back with our older example of smart and more smart. Here the idea is that a single system is responsible, as I have already talked about, single system is responsible for the generation of all objects whether they are one word or two words. So, based on that we have this kind of structure which we have just seen. So, similarly we look at let us say now the case of thief and stealer. So, following this this idea, there are two processes. This is again we talk about this is called root nominalization. So, if in case of thief, the structure will look like this. So, this is the root thief and we have this n here, but here there is no phonological component. So, this is why we have marked it as null. So, this is a null phonological component and thief is a root word. On the other hand, for in case of stealer, we have steal in the root and there is this little n that creates a noun from the word the root word steal. So, stealer is a possibility and then thief will look like this. So, stealer and thief both words they share the semantic space and they whereas thief is fine, stealer is not fine and but both of them can be expressed using this kind of a structural form. Now, if the need arises for a word to describe this idea that somebody who steals for a living against the law. So, if stealing is your profession, then you are a thief. That is the meaning of the word thief. Now, if somebody wants to express this idea, they already have the word thief. So, it makes the creation of a novel root nominalization unnecessary. That is the idea here. So, the process through which stealer is kind of disregarded is this, that they already have the word thief. So, you do not need to create this kind of a complex structure to arrive at stealer, because you already have thief. That is the hence it would make the analysis of stealer in terms of root nominalization unlikely. Only when the speaker is convinced that the meaning of stealer is not entirely taken care of by thief, then this form would be used. Now, there is a let me add a disclaimer here. This is a slightly debatable idea, but these days the stealer was not a very commonly used word some time back, but now you can actually if you search the web, there are password stealer, base stealer, this kind of words do exist. So, probably why it is happening is because the meaning may not be entirely overlapping, and that is when you have the word stealer. That is one of the arguments given in literature. The other format we have seen this before also. Other format is what is called deverbal agentive nominal. This is again, so steal here and then we have this the V here. So, this is the node here and then it goes up in the when you have to create a noun out of this, this is how the process will be. So, in this case the stealer is a deverbal agentive ER nominal in which a root and a verbalizing head combine, and then this combines, and then this in the next level it gets nominalized by an N. So, this analysis requires, now for this kind of a structure, for this analysis to hold, there has to be an object that the person steals. So, stealing needs, even in a case of even when you are not using the object itself, it is already understood there has to be an object, but if it is not mentioned, then it is odd, the usage of the word is odd. So, the analysis requires an object to be present which is not there. So, as a result there is something odd about the structure stealer in some contexts, that is why it is not used. So, basically what the distributed morphology talks about is that by looking at the structure, and the process that underlies to arriving at those structures can justify and can explain as to why certain forms are not used. You do not need a competition between lexical entities in order for the idea of blocking to emerge. So, the competition is not for grammaticality, rather the effect in this case has to do with what a root nominalization stealer could be used for. Where will you use it? So, because in order to use it, you need an object to be stealing. So, this is where, this is how you can explain it. Similarly, there is another idea called ill formedness, an important issue that again within the idea of blocking. This refers to cases like breaker, stealer again. So, these are also called ill formed structures. So, in case of breaker, there is no listed form that the speakers prefer, still breaker sounds odd. For example, in stealer you have thief. So, you do not need. So, the idea that because there is thief, it is you do not need to go through all that complex system to arrive at stealer. You already have something, you use it, but breaker does not have a thing like that, a listed item, a lexical item. So, but then we still do not use breaker. So, we could however use that, right, but there are some general domains where they could fit, but it does not, it simply are not used. So, what do we have at hand? To sum up, this idea of blocking has been debated extensively within the lexicalist and non-lexicalist theories. So, lexicalist theory is the theory that we talked about in the beginning, where you are talking about two different words, whether they are lexically connected or they are semantically connected, like synonyms. They can be, if there is one word already existing, then there is a competition in terms of the paradigmatic slots and so on. That is one. The non-lexicalist hypothesis is from the perspective of the generative syntax perspective. So, the distributed morphology, where they talk about the structure, how you can through grammar, through structure, you can explain as to why certain forms are not used and certain others are used. So, lexicalist approaches to blocking, these are the important names. I have quoted them and I will also add the references. I could not because we do not have time. So, we could not add all of their contributions. So, these are among the most important names from the lexicalist approach, and of course, we have not also discussed all of their positions here. But the main argument against lexicalist hypothesis is that these they might appear plausible in certain cases. However, the predictive power is less from the lexicalist position as far as using this kind of morphology is concerned. So, arriving at blocking, the predictive power of lexicalist hypothesis is weaker as opposed to the distributed morphology hypothesis. So, on the other hand, generative approach to grammar as formalized within distributed morphology, it gives an forces an analysis, seems to explain the phenomenon better, because you can explain the same structural properties can hold for various kinds of structures, various kinds of words and their in their analysis. So, it has a better predictive power as far as blocking is concerned. So, this is roughly in a nutshell what blocking is all about. In the next lecture, we will take up the other ideas of dual and single root hypothesis, and we will conclude with some more examples of the production of inflection by children. Thank you.